Kingdom Real Estate Investor Podcast. This is the show where we're really committed to telling the stories of faith-driven, kingdom-minded real estate investors, entrepreneurs, to show that Christ is King and real estate is a great vehicle to really advance His kingdom. And we have a fantastic guest on today. This guy is probably growing one of the fastest real estate agencies in the country, based in Florida. He's going to tell us all about why he decided to move from New Jersey down to Florida. I don't know. Not a hard guess for me, but I can see why. And he's all over social media. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation with my friend Leiva. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate you having me on today, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, so CEO of Culture Estate. I think your bio's old, man. It says based in New Jersey, but from the photos I'm seeing, you're not in New Jersey anymore.
Yeah, well, we were based out of New Jersey, and a lot of my team is still in New Jersey, so it's a quasi thing now. We're all over the map, but yeah, I'm mostly spending my days now in Naples, Florida. Thank God for that. It's always been a dream of mine to get out of the chilly weather and gloomy days of New Jersey, and somehow find my way down to Florida. So after the pandemic, that was kind of an opportunity that I saw, and
Yeah.
I took it.
Yeah. Why not, right? Why not?
Yeah,
Hey, well, we're gonna jump into a lot today. I mean, there's a lot about your story that's really intriguing. You know,
of
you're
course.
you're 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 inspiring others. You're growing a fast growing company. You're really kind of building a brand around your company, which I think can be super helpful. And you're kind of creating a story and an atmosphere around that. And then I know faith is a massive part of what you do as well. And so
Sure.
a lot to look forward to this conversation. But if you don't mind, man, let me just pray for us and we'll jump
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. Let's do it.
Father in heaven, thank you so much for just today, uh, just for your grace to us, that your new mercies are for us every single morning. And so pray that Lewis's story would just be inspiring to us. It would help us wherever we're at today in our business and life to see, God, that you want to participate with us in the small things and the big things, and that we would invite you in to do that. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
So why do you do what you do, man? I mean, let's talk. Actually, I really haven't interviewed a ton of people on the agency side, but
Yeah.
I think what's cool is you're not just a real estate agent. You're a business owner. You're a real estate entrepreneur. You're doing a lot of things. What got you into this? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. So, before I get started, everything I say here, none of this is to, glorify myself. This is just a testament of what God could do in someone who's relentless, someone who meets God
Mm,
halfway. So, yeah, when I first, my parents came to this country when I was 4 years old. And, for us, we really didn't see home ownership even as a possibility. We just rented apartments from actually, it seemed like year to year. Every year we're in a new apartment. But actually, my story started in your state. We actually moved to California first when we first got to the United States. And back in the 80s, a lot of people don't know this, but you could discriminate if a family had a child. So back then we couldn't even get an apartment. Like we couldn't even get someone. We were living with friends, and we couldn't even get someone to rent to us because of me. So being the fact that my parents don't like to impose on anyone, we ended up getting an apartment in the roughest of neighborhoods ever. I don't even know. It might have been South Central. God knows. I don't. I was so young I can't recall. But what I do remember is that my brother at the time was about 18 years old, and I was maybe he was a little younger, maybe he was 17. And my dad and him had went to go work that day, and after they came home from work, we're having dinner in this apartment in like I think it had to be a housing complex, man. I could barely remember it, but I remember this. Get a knock on the door, and the police raided our apartment and took my brother and my dad outside at gunpoint. And I'm watching this whole thing through the window, and I'm thinking I'm gonna lose my mom, I'm gonna lose my dad and my brother. And after that, it ended up being that there were a lot of drug activity in the area, and there was gang stuff going on. So they mistook our apartment for the wrong apartment. So thank God, we were able to get out of that. But my family said, you know what, this is not going to work for us. So we ended up migrating from California all the way to New Jersey because my other brother and sister had initially built roots in New Jersey. So we went from sunny California to gloomy New Jersey, and I spent about 35 years in New Jersey. So as you can tell, that I did find a home there for myself. And for us, it was rough. Like any a family who migrates from another country, you begin very humble, and I think it builds character. And we didn't really know what home ownership felt like there, and we just kept moving and moving and moving. And then I would see homeowners, I would see people who own homes as almost kind of like people who were wealthy, rich, people who are just higher class. And I would see real estate agents as being almost like superheroes. And I said, I want to be one of those people who actually does what what they do for a living, is just help people. Like, they help people find homes and they get paid for it. And I thought, that would be so awesome if one day I could be in real estate and I can buy a house and fix it and then sell it for a profit. And this is what I'm thinking as like a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid, right? Some kids are thinking about like being doctors or lawyers or firefighters. I'm looking, how do I flip a house when I'm 7 years
That's
old?
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just got ingrained into me. And one of my older brothers, I have two older brothers and two older sisters, but one of my older brothers ended up, well, both of my older brothers ended up getting into construction. So one of them ended up opening a construction company, and he would go and work in some of the very nice affluent areas in New Jersey. And on my summer vacations, I used to go with him to do some brickwork and masonry work, because that's the kind of construction he was into. And I said, wow, how is it possible that these people can live in these homes? They're so nice. And back then they were probably like $400,000, $500,000 homes, but that was a lot of money. That's like million and a half in today's money. And I'm like, one day I'm going to own a house in this area or in these areas, And I said that'll be my goal as I get older. So when I turned 18, I told my dad, take me to a real estate agent and see if I can get a home. And at 18, I was barely out of high school, and I'm just an adult. And my dad took me to a real estate agent friend of his, and she said, how is he going to get a house? He doesn't even have any reported income. Because as a kid, I used to cut hair, and that was like my talent when I was young. So I used to cut hair, and I saved everything. So I had the money for the down payment, but I didn't have, obviously the credit built up or the income, because everything was cash. All your friends are paying you in cash. So I said, I'm going to find a way. So after a couple of years went by, we ended up figuring out a way. We refinanced a house that we finally bought in 1998. We refinanced it a couple of years after that. We pulled some money out, and then we bought our first investment property. It was a 4-family house right down the block from where we owned our house. And that was my first introduction to real estate investing. And it was not an easy one, I'll tell you this much, because even though, we bought it right before the bubble. So we bought it in like 2006, 2007, or maybe a little earlier, maybe 2005, 2006. We bought it at a decent price. I think we paid like 300 grand for it at the time, 350. But the lesson that I learned there was, number one, renovations. I didn't know anything about renovations, what they cost. And number two, I learned how to be a landlord, or how not to be a landlord, actually, because I had no clue what I was doing. So I would literally just rent apartments to anybody who would show up. And one of my tenants taught me a valuable lesson, that you got to screen people before you let them in, because from day one, the tenants started selling drugs from the apartment. They had pit bulls in the apartment, and it got so bad that I had to evict them. And when they finally left, they tried to take the washer and dryer with them that wasn't even theirs. It was part of the property. It was so bad. But
Wow.
I learned, our mistakes are that, just learning lessons, right? I learned, and I said to my dad, you know what, maybe we got into it a little bit more than what we expected. Maybe we should think about selling this thing after like only a year of owning it. So, and just how good God is, and to our benefit, the house improved, it went up in value like $100,000. So I said, we can get 100 grand more for it. And we did. So we took that money, we rolled it over. We rolled it over into another property, and we basically, that one, we got a little more involved. We did more like a ground up construction from old property we rehabbed. And that property ended up being a very, very nice single family home. And we decided to actually move into the property because it was so nice. And that was right around 2007, 2008. And then the market crashed. And me, as a real estate investor, I also decided that it would have been a good idea for myself to get into real estate, because I was getting the hang of things. I said, you know what, I'm going to stop cutting hair and I'm going to get into real estate. So I did. I got into real estate, and I did exceptionally well my second year. But my first year, I didn't make any money at all. But my second year, I started making money, and everything was great.
From an
And
agency
then,
standpoint, you're talking about from selling listings, selling homes.
yeah, absolutely. So I started doing really well my second year. First year was all about learning, all about just, figuring things out. So second year, I started doing really well. And then, as you know, 2008 happened. So I went from closing a bunch of deals and doing really well for myself to closing nothing. That's, if people were around back then, that's kind of how it was. So long story short, I learned humility. That's what I learned throughout that time. Lost that house. I lost a condo I bought in Miami. I lost everything basically. The only thing I didn't lose were the things that I learned along the way. And I went back to the basics, and I really just got, really down to the nitty gritty and like, what is it that I want for, because before 2008, let's be honest, anybody could have made money in the business. You just needed to be in it long enough to make money. You really didn't have a skill set, you didn't need a skill set. But after 2008, you really had to actually, be good at sales. Like you need to like figure out, okay, what are sales about? How can I add value? How can I find properties that are below value and bring them to my investors? How can I get myself into some of these deals? So I went from being an investor and having money to having nothing and starting off with just my license, basically, right? So I figured a strategy out where I said, instead of me crying about the market, instead of me listening to the news and see how bad it is, me preparing for the end of the world, because you guys remember that was kind of like a thing back then, that the world is gonna, the dollar is gonna collapse and all that. Instead of doing all that, why don't I just look for opportunities? So I started looking for investors that were making money, and I was thinking to myself, how can I add value to them? How can I align myself with their needs so I can bring them value, and at the same time I can become of value myself. I can make some money on my own. So what I ended up doing was I started asking these investors, what is it that you need? Like, what can I bring to you? They're like, oh, I have these couple properties. If you get me a buyer before I'm done, that would save me some time of marketing it on the market once it's finished. So I did. I ended up getting buyers for a bunch of investors. And when you're able to do that, it really kind of allows you to dictate how much your commission is going to be. Because if you're going to save the investor money, you can get a 6, 7, 8% commission. It doesn't matter what your commission is, as long as he gets his numbers. So I was able to do a couple of deals like that with a few investors and started saving money again. And then I got back into investing on my own. I brought my dad into it, investing on, I think, like my second or third transaction, because he had saved a couple of dollars as well. And within the next 2 or 3 transactions, we had made so much money back, because we're blessed that we did like 100 plus on like 3 houses straight. And I was able to retire my dad. I was able to go ahead and start focusing more on investing myself, and then get back into sales, because I started learning a new skill set for myself, which was working with distressed inventory and working with investors. And that just opened up the world for me. After that, I just started getting really good at the things I was doing day to day, started educating other people. I started my first brokerage in 2015, I think it was in 2015, with a partner, and it didn't work out. After a couple of years, we worked together, and I found out quickly that the best way to really start a real estate brokerage is on your own. You got to have to, because you have ideas, your partners have different ideas. It's better just to kind of do things on your own. So I learned a lot of valuable lessons with that. And then finally, I opened up my own brokerage in 2016 is when I opened up a Culture Estate. That's when I did that. So my first brokerage had to be in 2013. I think that's when it was. So in 2016, I opened up Culture with 2 agents and myself. And that's basically where we started. And it was going to be really rough, because I wasn't really planning to open up a brokerage. It was kind of like I had to open up a brokerage because I had gotten into we had separated our businesses, my partner and I. So he's kind of like, hey, listen, we got to do things separately. He bought out my end of the business, supposedly what, the business was worth. So he gave me 20 grand. And at that time, 20 grand was a lot of the majority of the money I had left over, because I had just got done dumping a ton of money into a property that I bought for my family and myself. And I was pouring every dollar I had into building this house for my kids and my wife. And it just I was going from closing to closing, trying to make sure that that I was doing that, because I wanted to do it all out of pocket. I didn't want to finance all this stuff. And I was left with the 20 grand my partner gave me. So I gave the 20 grand to my operations manager, and I said, look, here's 20,000, make this last and take care of everything we got to take care of here at our new office that we opened in 2016. And I'm going to go visit my parents in Guatemala for a month, and I'll be back after a month, because I need to charge my battery, because for the next few years, I'm not going to stop. I'm literally going to work around the clock. So I went to see my parents, and it was a time of reflection for me. I read about 3 books on business, a lot of great books on business, on how to really take your business to the next level. Came back a changed man, and battery fully charged. And we went from 2 agents to 100 agents in 2 years. became one of the fastest growing brokerages in the state. And it's been a humongous blessing. And I credit all that to just, God's grace and allowing me to go from learning lesson to learning lesson. And fast forward to 2019, we had continuously kept hitting this peak. We kept hitting this ceiling where we couldn't cross over 100 agents. It was just like we get to 100 and we lose some. We get to 100 and we lose some. It was just like, it was very tough. So I knew that my model was broken. So I had to find a way for me to not only just attract agents, but to keep agents. Why does a retention model that we can build out? So I started thinking about different options and ultimately settled on partnering with EXP Realty, which took me to the next leg of my journey, which I am on now. And EXP Realty, what if people out there don't know what they are, or what they offer, is they offered me to take my brokerage and leverage it not only locally but internationally, and obviously across all 50 states in the US. What it does is it allows you to now expand your brokerage and expand your agent base across boundary lines or across state lines without having to be licensed there, without having to have a brick and mortar office there, without having to coach or train these agents or do any of the legalities, liability issues, none of that, all the stuff that brokers kind of suffer with in the background. So we did that, and we went from 100 agents to now 200 plus agents just 2 years later. Even through obviously the pandemic that we went through, we experienced growth, and it's been the biggest blessing, because not only obviously do we have financial freedom. You can get that in a multitude of ways, but a lot of people who achieve financial freedom, they don't have time freedom and they don't have location freedom. And because of this union that we created, I was able to step back and not wear so many hats and do the things that brokers have to do on a day-to-day basis, which now allowed me to now mentor my agents more and also grow the organization more with having all that extra time. But not only that, but the most important thing is there were days and sometimes 2-3 days in a row where I wouldn't even be able to see my two daughters. I had two little girls, because working as an entrepreneur, you got 14-hour days, 16-hour days, you work weekends, there was really no time for me to really stop and enjoy what I was working for. But, now that I've kind of like relocated myself and taken myself out of the equation and allowed my partnership to really kind of go out there and do the heavy lifting for me, it's allowed me to get my life back. So now the lessons I'm learning today are kind of like, how do you find balance in business? How do you still make money, be productive, and grow your business while still making time for the important things? So that's kind of where I am right now. It's the season of my life that I'm in, is that I like to be more of the visionary that pushes the business, and not so much the operator that's stuck in the business. So I think Tony Robbins speaks a lot about that, and some of you might be familiar with those things. But it's really now is a game changer, because now if I can do that, and I can allow others to really build the business with me, not for me, they're no longer going to be working, as an agent, but now I consider all my agents a partner. So now that I'm building up my partners, our organization is growing tremendously, and we see ourselves getting to 1,000 agents within the next 2 years easily. That's the trajectory that we're on now. So God is good, and that's been my journey so far. And as far as the investing goes, I've never stopped. We've had partnerships with auction.com. We've had partnerships with a lot of other educational platforms for us to be able to teach others what we've learned along the way. We've had all types of programs that we developed specifically for investors that we ran in New Jersey, and obviously those things kind of came to a pause, after the pandemic triggered that moratorium that we're kind of seeing the tail end of now. So I see a lot of more opportunities coming around for investors and for people who want to get into the space. So yeah, I'm excited about that. So that's kind of my story. I mean, I know I took a little bit of time on that.
I love that. Well, let me ask you this, man, because your company is called, Culture. Well, the name Culture is in your business there. I mean, you talk about going to 100 your stop. Now you're building over 200. I mean, what have you found, like, as a leader? Clearly, you're charging the way forward, but how have you continued to be able to kind of build that culture or keep that culture? I think with any growing business, right? Like that's I mean, especially as you're growing across state lines now, that's something I'd be curious about. Like, how did you keep that culture when you kind of hit that thresh point?
Sure. Great question. So I'm going to revert this back to a Christian metaphor. So when Jesus walked around, he was one person, and he educated 12 disciples, to carry on his word. And he had to entrust those 12 disciples to one day create the millions of Christians that we have today, right? Or maybe billion, maybe even closer to a billion, who knows. But you have to be able to trust your leaders to be able to go out there and replicate what you create. If you can't do that, then you'll never grow an organization. If the organization continuously needs you to carry on the culture, the message, if you don't set the right principles and right standards, obviously they're not going to either. So if you lead by example, you will flush out the people who you don't want in your company, the cancers or the people who are just looking for trouble, and you attract the right people. And when you have the right people and you pour into them without any reservation, you can create really great entrepreneurs and leaders and people who can run the organization probably even better than you can. But you have to be able to pour into them. So we've done that. And when we have these great leaders, then they create great leaders, and then they create great leaders. And that's just the way that the company really has flourished. Because before we'd create great leaders, they'd get a better opportunity somewhere else, and then they'd leave the organization. But with the new model that we have now, our leaders, well, our talent is what I like to call them, and our business partners, they actually own the company. That's what the game changer is now, is that we own the company together. It's not just Lewis's company. We all own it. We all have stock. We all have shares in the company, which just over the last 5 years alone, for a good producing agent, that stock is well north of $1 million just over the last 5 years for someone who has been producing at an average level. Someone who closes 3 deals a month, they have over 1.2 million in stock just from the last 5 years appreciation. So that is the reason why agents now are sticking around and we're able to grow like we are, because instead of working for a company, they're working for themselves. They're working for their own company, and it gives them that different how a mindset of kind of like renting versus owning, like how you do when you own a house or rent an apartment. It's a different
Yeah.
feeling. So now that this is how we've been able to really scale that and keep the culture and keep the right people.
I love that. You've done a ton, man, on branding. You talk about building a story kind of around what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's I feel like that's so essential in today's environment, right? Like if you're going to continue to build something big and build a culture, like you got to learn to tell your message online, and you've done a phenomenal job of that. I mean, where did you learn that, right? And how, and what are you learning right now about continuing to kind of tell your message online?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and thank you for asking. I got a lot of people I'm sure struggle with this because we all get in our own way. We get in our heads, and then we don't do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you tell your story online, you're always going to think to yourself, oh, what is someone going to think? Or are they going to think that I'm bragging? Or are they going to think that I'm a loser? Or whatever you think, right? So I was no exception. When I first picked up the camera, which was my cell phone, right? That was basically it. I didn't have a fancy camera or anything like that. And I just wanted to tell a message. I just wanted to tell people what I knew. And, but it took me so many attempts to actually build up the courage to do that, because I'm naturally an introverted person. I had to come out of my shell to be a leader, but I'm naturally by nature, if I had my choice, I would just stay in a house by myself and live my days. But that's not how we're highest and best use. So I've learned that with telling my story, you will get a lot of people who are going to resonate with you, and you're going to help motivate them, inspire them, change their lives. And then, yeah, you're going to have a one or two haters. That's okay. And with that, you got to understand that these people don't hate you. They hate themselves, and it just comes out in a way where they try to knock other people down. So as long as you can understand that the reason why you're creating your brand and you're teaching people and you're educating people about your journey, and you're letting them know, hey guys, this is what I found works, this is what doesn't work, and you create a brand around helping people and around positivity, it's going to come back to you 100-fold. That's how we were able to grow from 2 agents to 100, because we told our story. One thing that I knew that we could do better than the big guys was be nimble enough to pivot into social. While they were trying to figure out what they could and couldn't talk about without getting in trouble, we were telling a story about how we were creating this new brand. When we first built our office, and how the renovations were coming out, when we first got our business cards, when we first got our signs, new agents we were getting in, we would have this thing called, every Monday morning, we would have this thing called the Monday Morning Mastermind. And a requirement for every Monday morning was that one of our agents would always have to come and kind of tell their story and they're kind of where they came from, why they're in real estate, what their goals are, a little bit about themselves. And I will tell you, it was just about every other person they got up on there. First of all, everybody was nervous, right? So that's one thing. I purposely always make everyone nervous, and that's good because you have to get out of that. But almost every other agent that came up there would literally break down in tears because they're telling their story, and a lot of times they say things that are emotional to them, myself included. I almost broke down when I gave my story. But I was recording this stuff and I'm putting it out there on Facebook, on YouTube, and other real estate agents are like, what is this? Like, I want to be a part of that, So as you're creating this culture, like the name of my company, you got to build it around other people. You can't just build it around yourself. You got to tell a story of what you're doing. And as long as you can understand that the reason why you're turning on that camera is to serve a greater good, you'll find it easier to get over yourself and get over your insecurities. But as long as you're consistent with it, that's really the key.
And that's so huge, man. I mean, I love what you said. Like, you want to separate yourself in a saturated market, like tell
Yeah,
stories, And I mean,
of
because
course.
you can always create a blue market when you tell stories, because
Mhm.
who can replicate that? You know what I'm saying? Especially your
Yeah,
own story. So I find that really powerful. Let me ask you just one or two more questions.
sure.
I mean, how do you see your faith in God playing out? I mean, clearly you've talked about so many things that sound
Mhm.
Christ-like. But I mean, like, talk to me, like, in terms of kind of how you see yourself as a man of faith, kind of operating on a day to day. Where
Yeah,
do you feel that way, man? Like, honestly, for you, like, do you feel like, hey, I'm really participating with God in my work?
yeah,
I mean, because there's one thing of like being philanthropic and helping others, but and a lot of people do that, but I don't know if everyone really ties that to, man, I'm really participating
yeah.
with God and in my faith in that regard. How do you feel about that?
So I've come to terms that with what I'm doing is my ministry. The way
Mm,
that I lead people is my ministry because my mother told me a long time ago when I was a young kid that she dedicated me to God's work while I was still in her stomach. And I told her she was crazy. I lived a wild. I was in, like, even though my dad was a pastor, by the way, like I'm a PK. I was a bad kid. I did a lot of bad stuff, got myself in a lot of trouble. Thank God, that I never, was, seriously injured or ended up in jail or anything like that. But I learned at a very early age that God is a real thing, and if it wasn't for him, I probably would have been gone a long time ago. And I'm here for a purpose. So when I got into leadership, I closed out every single one of my masterminds, every single one of my Monday masterminds with a prayer. And still to this day, we close it all out with a prayer. I know that majority of my people love it. Some people don't even know what prayer was. And remember, we're doing this on not only in person, but we're doing this on online. We get thousands of views, and that is really what I came to realize one day, that wow, my mother was correct. I was like, I am. She said you're gonna be a pastor, is what she was saying. I'm thinking pastor. I'm thinking, nah, I'm gonna be on stage at a church. I was like, that's not my thing. But then ended up becoming fascinated with public speaking, fascinated with educating, and doing these masterminds, praying for my agents, praying for their families, and nowadays, like, I have agents that call me and just ask me for prayers. Like today, I had a girl ask me, "Could you pray for me?" Because I'm going to a listing that's $1.2 million, and I'm very nervous. So, I prayed for her and I told her in the prayer, I was like, remember, God says you could do all things through him. And not only that, but everything he could do, you could do more. So, after giving her that reassurance, she felt like $1 million. And I feel like, that's how I'm using the gifts that God has given me to build his kingdom through the guise of a real estate brokerage.
yeah, I
I
love
would
that,
say.
man. Like, we can
Thank you.
pastor wherever. And I asked the question. We had our mastermind event out here just this weekend, and I asked that. It's funny you say that, because I asked the question, and it was more of like, of course, clearly this is not the only way to do ministry, but what if your business, and I'll ask this today for everyone listening, like, what if your business was the only way in which you could do ministry? Like,
Mhm.
what if you could only serve God through your business? How would you operate? What would you do differently? What would you do more intentionally?
Yeah.
And I think, man, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us just kind of overlook some of like, that's a great, if you interact with people, man, you're in ministry. You know what I'm saying? Like, if that's your
Yep.
business to interact with people, you have the opportunity for ministry. So I see that, man. And I see that you probably do a fantastic job for your people of kind of
Thank
pouring
you.
into and loving them.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes preaching to the choir is easy, right? God, for some reason, God has delivered a lot of Christians, pastors, everything my way to be part of the organization. But sometimes you run into the person who says, "Oh no, I'm a non-believer," and I asked them, I was like, that's unfortunate. You must have had a bad experience with the church or religion or something like that, because that's usually where that comes from. And she did. She had a really bad. She said my dad was a deacon, but he was also a royal POS. So, and those kind of people that we're supposed to minister to, and those are people we're supposed to talk to, because they're the lost sheep. They're the ones that we have to pour into, because it's easy to pray for the ones who want to get prayed on, but the ones who don't know Christ and don't know salvation, those are the ones that we're supposed to kind of like spend our time with. So I have been able to, and bring some of those people closer and closer and closer. So that it takes time.
Yeah. What's next, man? I mean, what's your vision for, you said you're in this second phase, or you're kind of where you find yourself with EXP. I mean,
Yeah.
what are you excited about these days?
Well, I'm excited about growing the organization internationally. We're working on Croatia, Kenya, and
Hmm.
a couple other countries we're trying to open up. And the reason why I want to go wide and deep on my organization, and both, not just wide but both also deep, is because I'm trying to build something that would allow me to do more of God's work. What I mean by that is that when I'm able to get to a certain point in my business, I can pretty much step out completely, and I can go and do stuff. I'd love to go to, like, our company XP Realty. We're really involved in doing charity work. We build homes in Mexico. We do a lot of good stuff around the world. One of my passions, or one of my missions, is to eradicate childhood slavery. So I really want to build up my business to give me the ammunition, which is cash, money, and time, to be able to do more of that, and just to be able to, really use the gifts that God has given me, and the opportunity God has given me, to really make myself super passive through real estate. That way I can go out there and be more hands-on.
Bro, we gotta get you in some multifamily deals next, man.
There you go, man.
That's the next level. Lewis, man, I've really enjoyed this. And it sounds like you're on you live your life missionally, and you're looking to do big things. If people want to be a part of that mission or follow that journey,
Sure.
where do they go?
It's really easy to find us. We are Culture Estate on every single platform. And if you wanted to connect with me, just go to our website, culture.estate, and you can submit a contact form, and I contact you within a day or two.
Guys, go follow this man on YouTube. He's creating some great content. If you're down in Naples, Florida, make sure you look out for Lewis and Culture Estate. So appreciate having you on, man. Really enjoyed
No
it.
worries. Thank you, my brother. Appreciate being here.
All right, guys. See you next week.